This is a training session on the 17 indisputable laws of teamwork. During the 1990s, what I have found to happen is that leadership became a very prominent subject. If you went to the business community, they wanted to learn about leadership. If you went into the government community, they wanted to learn about leadership. If you went into the church community, they wanted to learn about leadership. If you went into any community, leadership became kind of the big deal. And in the 90s, I wrote several books on the subject of leadership. In 1993, I wrote a book called Developing the Leader Within You, helping people develop themselves as leaders. As a complementary book, the year later, I wrote a book called Developing the Leaders Around You, kind of helping a leader develop leaders around him or her. And then in 1997, I wrote a book that was kind of a soft leadership book called Becoming a Person of Influence. Again, how to have influence with people, basically how to become a better leader with people. In 1998, I wrote a book that has become very popular, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. This has been used major in the business community, government community, the church community. And this was a book that helped people understand that there were certain laws that if they learned those laws, if they obeyed and followed those laws, they would become very effective as a leader. And I followed the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership with a book entitled The 21 Indispensable Qualities. I talked about what are the qualities that need to be inside a person to be the leader that they really want to become. Then I followed that up with a kind of a Christian religious leadership book called The 21 Most Powerful Minutes in a Leader's Day, where I took the 21 laws and applied it to biblical characters so that people could, again, identify the laws with people who really did a good job with them. Okay. One thing that I found very interesting as I taught this decade of leadership is that as leaders grew, as leaders learned, as leaders matured, as leaders developed, I found that they began to ask themselves not only how can I lead better or how can I develop people around me to lead better, but they began to talk about teamwork because they found that nobody is a leader in every area. For example, in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, most of the audience here, how many of you have the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership? Oh, this is very good. Now, keep your hands up, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. The people that have their hands up now in this room are truly the great leaders in this room. Now, you noticed, didn't you? You noticed I did not ask how many have read the 21 That's way too big of a risk. I'm not going there. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Okay. Now, anybody that has read the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the first thing they come to the realization is that they're not good in all 21 laws. Is that not true? Let me just ask you, how many of you probably fell a little short in at least 2 or 3 of the 21 Irrefutable Laws? Okay, thank you very much. Now, the reason I asked that question and the reason there's such laughter in the audience is because anybody that takes the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership book and begins to dissect and learn those laws understands quickly that in some laws they excel and in some laws they do not. Now, that's where teamwork comes in. You see, what I have found is that the moment we realize that we do not do well in all of the leadership laws, the next question is then, who does well in a leadership law that I don't do well? And all of a sudden, there begins to be what I would call this urgency to develop a team. Does that make sense? Because teamwork matures, teamwork takes leadership and allows it to be what it really needs to become. Now, this is going to show my age, but there was an old commercial, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago on Bo Jackson, who played 2 sports. Remember, he played football and baseball, and it was kind of I think it was a Nike commercial, kind of a bow nose deal, and basically, how many of you remember the bow nose? Okay, well, most of you as old as I am, okay. Well, you know the story of how supposedly it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing that Bo knows everything, and so Wayne Gretzky says Bo knows hockey, and obviously the obvious conclusion of the commercial was, even Bo Jackson doesn't know everything. And the conclusion that any person that studies leadership will come up to, if they really understand leadership, is that it's obvious that you aren't a good leader in every area. Therefore, the need for teamwork. And that's what this training series is all about. Now, I need to do one more thing, and then we're going to teach the first law of teamwork. Here's what I need you to understand. If I were sitting where you are and I would be taking the notes that you're taking, I would be asking myself the question, what makes a teamwork law truly a law? I mean, why don't you say, John, this is a teamwork thought, or this is a teamwork principle, or this is a teamwork idea? Well, I use the same grid that I use for the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership for the 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork. The very same grid, because I have to, as I teach teamwork to you, it's my desire to give you a solid foundation that you can literally lean on and go to the bank on and build your teamwork off of. So, let's look at the qualifying tests to becoming teamwork laws. There are 4 of them. Number 1, they're not based on culture, gender, or age. Very simply stated, they're not limited to a gender, they're not limited to an age, they're not limited to a culture. In fact, we teach teamwork, we teach leadership internationally through our equipping organization, the Enjoy Group. And what I have found is the laws of leadership, they work in every country. The laws of teamwork, they're going to work in every country. Why? Because they're not limited. That's what makes it a law. Number 2, they relate and apply to all communities. They apply to the business community, they apply to the government community, they apply to the religious community, they apply to the academic community. In other words, these teamwork laws will work anywhere. As you view this video, and as you study teamwork, no matter what your situation, these laws will work in it. Number 3, they are recognized by other teammates as teamwork laws. In other words, very simply, we just sit down with players on teams and we ask them very, very pointedly, are these teamwork laws working? Is this truly a law? Is this something you can really go to the bank on? And finally, number 4, they stand the test of time. In other words, they're not dated, they're not faddish, they're not in now, and 5 years from now they'll be out. These teamwork laws worked in the 1900s, they're working now in the 2000s, they'll work in the 2100s. They are not limited to time. Let me make 4 observations about the laws that you're about to learn concerning teamwork. Number 1, these laws can be learned. You can learn these laws. The reason I know that is for many years now I've been training teams. For many years I've been developing team members. I could put a name behind every teamwork law that you're going to study. I promise you, you can learn these laws. Now, I want you to just look at your neighbor and I want you to say to him right now, even you can learn these laws. Doesn't that give you great hope, huh? I mean, think about it for a moment. That person you brought here today, that you were not sure you could ever make anything out of. I mean, you even paid their way. You bought the ticket because you thought, you kept asking yourself, is there any hope? That person you're seated beside right now that you perhaps up to this moment thought there was no hope. I've got great news for you. Even they can learn these laws. Makes you feel good, doesn't it? It also makes you wonder, why did they buy that ticket for me? Second observation, very simply, these laws stand alone. I'm going to teach you 17 laws of teamwork today. I promise you they stand alone. What do I mean by that? Very simply, you don't need to learn law number 1 to go to law number 2, to go to law number 3, to go to law number 4. They stand alone. You may not do good on 1, but you do very good on 2. In other words, they don't have to have any sequence. They aren't to be built upon. Number 3, these laws carry consequences. Simply stated, if you do well on these laws, you're going to develop a good team. If you do poorly on these laws, you're not going to have a good team. You're going to rise and fall on how well you're able to learn and implement these teamwork laws with your team. And the final observation, these laws are the foundation of teamwork. These are the laws that you build your team on. Let me give you one suggestion before I teach law number 1. This is what I call a training suggestion for you. If I were you and I just finished watching the introductory part of this training series, what I would do is I would ask myself, how can I best be a team member and how can I best develop team members around me? And I'm going to suggest that you do 4 things that will be greatly helpful in developing yourself as a team member or developing your team. Number 1, read the book, The 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork. Start there. Read the book. After you have read the 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork, the second thing I would encourage you to do is watch these training videos. And I would encourage you to watch with your team 1 video a week. Each law is going to be 15 to 20 minutes in length. Very simply stated, what I want you to do is every week sit down with your team, watch one of the laws. Now, number 3, reread the law that you just watched on the video. Let me explain. As you have now watched me teach it on video, go back to that law, and you have probably 7 days before you go to the next video, the next law, the next training session. Take those 7 days and work that law in your life. Ask yourself questions like, how well do I implement this law of teamwork? Ask yourself the question, how well do the people around me implement this law of teamwork? In other words, give yourself 7 days to practice the law that you just watched. And then finally, number 4, apply this law not only to your life, but teach it to someone else. Now, you're watching the videos perhaps as a team. Maybe you have a business that you're in together or whatever. You're watching as a team. But what I want to encourage you is take this law and go to somebody who's never seen the law or heard the law and teach them what you're learning and practice what you're doing. Okay, I know you're ready. I'm ready. Let's go to law number 1 of the 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork. Today I would like to talk to you on law number 2 of teamwork, and that is the law of the big picture. And the law of the big picture says the goal is more important than the role. I love this law because as I watch teams, many times I watch them totally lose perspective. And somehow, and this happens to me, this can happen to anybody, somehow we begin to think that what we do as a part of the team begins to be more important than anything else. And we get kind of consumed with our job, and we get consumed with our role, and we become what I call role conscious instead of goal conscious. What I want you to understand about this law is that any time you lose perspective, any time you fail to see the big picture, almost always you fall into the rut of feeling that what you're doing is most important. In fact, you know what the number 1 challenge I think of a leader is when working with a team? I believe the biggest challenge is keeping the big picture in front of the team at all times. Because isn't it true, there's a tendency for us just to lose the big picture. And again, begin to get consumed in our job and what we're doing and just fail to see the big picture. For example, in the Enjoy group, one of the things we found that was very helpful is if we have people working in the stock room with our products, for example, or some of the people perhaps making phone calls and registrations or filling in data entry in computers. Here's what we found. One of the most important things we can do every once in a while is to get them out of that seat or whatever their job is and take them to a conference and let them see the big picture. Let them see how important they are to making it all happen, but let them see the big picture. Because when we fail to see the big picture, when we lose perspective, almost always we'll put our role above the team's goal. Let me give you, I love this piece. This is one of the funniest pieces on perspective that I've ever read, and it's a wonderful story. So let me just read it to you, okay? This is a story of a girl in college who's in a little trouble, and so she's writing to her mother at home. Okay, dear Mom, Since I've been away at college one full semester, I think it's time to bring you up to date as to what is going on. Shortly after I arrived at college, I got bored with dormitory life, and I stole $10 out of my roommate's purse. With the money, I rented a Honda bike and crashed it into the telephone pole a few blocks from the college. I broke my leg, but was rescued by a young doctor who lives upstairs from the apartment house on the corner. He took me in, nursed me back to good health, set my leg, and thanks to him, I'm up and around again. We wanted to let you know that we're going to be married as soon as possible, since we're having some trouble on the blood test because there's a disease that keeps showing up. We do hope, however, that we will be married before the baby arrives, and we will be home shortly thereafter to live with you and Dad. I know you will love the baby as much as you have me, even though it will be of a different religion. Please try to understand the reason we're having to come home and stay with you and Dad is because my doctor friend wants out of medical school because of all the attention he was giving to me and my condition. Really, Mom, I didn't steal $10 from my roommate's purse, or rent a Honda bike, or hit a telephone pole, or break my leg. I did not meet a young doctor of a different religion, nor are we going to be married. There is no disease or test or baby to worry about. And I won't be home to live with you and Dad, and he won't be either. Mom, I am getting a D in geometry. And I'm getting an F in geology. And I wanted you to accept these grades in their proper perspective. I love that story because it's a story of keeping things in proper perspective. As a leader working with your team, you've got to keep the big picture. They have to constantly see perspective, or they will begin to think their role is more important than the team goal. So in your notes, my role as a team member must always submit to the goal of the team. Classic illustration. It's just a recent one. It's a sports one, but it'll work. The Los Angeles Lakers this year won the NBA World Championship. They have two great players, Kobe and Shaq. Now, these two players probably, arguably, are the two best players in the NBA. But throughout the season, much of the year, they didn't win. They weren't very successful. Well, they had a little bit of a winning record, but everybody knew they weren't reaching their potential. You know why? Because Shaq and Kobe were arguing over their role on the team. They were arguing who the star was and who was the player that really made it happen. Now, as they got close to the playoffs, they settled their differences, they put them aside, and they began to play team ball. And all of a sudden, they went on a winning streak that broke a playoff record. Why? I can tell you what happened. What happened is these two highly individually gifted, talented ball players understood that their role was not as important as the goal of winning a championship. I promise you, if they would have not become servants in their role and submitted their role to the goal, they would have not won the world title. You see, when it comes to leading, this is very important. If you are a person that thinks that you lead by position, and I run into people like this all the time, they say, well, you know, I'm the president of the company. Well, it's my title. It's my job. And if you're a position kind of a leader, let me say something to you. You're going to always be into the role. And you're always going to be saying, well, now, you follow me because you're under me, and here's where I am, and here's where you are on the pole. And you will always be putting your role up ahead of the goal. And this is not what you want to do. Here's what I want you to understand. Great leaders often submit their role as a leader in a servant's way to someone else to facilitate and add value to the team. It's what I call sometimes, I call this the myth of the head table. There's a myth that says basically if you sit at a head table, if I happen to be the leader of this organization, this company, and this is my head table chair, you know, it's kind of the end of the table, whatever, it kind of means that I'm always leading. Here's what I want you to understand. There's no such thing as a head table where the leader always leads. We've already shared that in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, not everybody does all 21 laws well. So therefore, what that means is there are many times when I submit my role as the designated leader to someone else because they're going to do a better job than I am. And I must understand it's the goal of the team that's more important than my role as a leader. So in your notes, here's the way this works. A servant leader, and I think this is the best way to describe what I'm trying to teach in law number 2. A servant leader serves the mission and leads by serving those on the mission with him. That is so good. Let's talk about it for a moment. Because I have a goal in the law of the big picture, and that is by the time you're done understanding this teamwork law, my goal is every person who has a role, whether it's a big role or a small role, every person understands that you always submit your role to the benefit of the team. Now, here's a classic illustration, gang. Recently, I spent some time in London. It's one of my favorite cities because my wife, Margaret, and I both love history. And when you go to London, and if you go to London, one of the things you really want to do, because I love history and because I love leadership, one of the people I love to read after and study is Winston Churchill. What an incredible leader he was. I mean, that man, I believe, all of Europe owes their democracy and freedom to Winston Churchill. And he stood up to the Germans, he stood up to Hitler, he stood up and against odds, determined that England would not be taken by the Nazis. Now, when you go to London, there's a place in London where during the war, Winston Churchill met with his war, what he called his war cabinet, underneath a major building. It's in a bunker. Now here's what I want you to, when you go, you've got to see this. In fact, it just inspires me every time I see it. When the war came on, World War II, and England realized that they were in major difficulties and they had major challenges, Winston Churchill went under this major building. It was all bunkered with steel and with concrete for their protection. And he said, I must put with me on my team in this bunker for the next several years, and for this one I think it was about 5 years, he said, I must bring the best team members with me. So here's what he did. He chose 7 other men that were the greatest minds of England to go under the bunker and live with him and stay with him until he could help England come to victory. Now here's what I want you to understand. He didn't choose his best friends. Some of the people that he put on his cabinet war room team were political enemies. But he said, this is not a time for politics. This is not a time for Democrat and Republican. This is not a time for pettiness and division and politics. He said, I've got to get the best minds in this war room because we've got to bring England together. Here's a man who understood the goal is more important than the role. In fact, what's interesting is one of the men who was on his cabinet war room team, one of the men, as soon as the war was over, defeated him and became the next prime minister. In other words, he worked right alongside a person who would take his job after the war was over. But it was okay with Winston Churchill because he understood that the goal is more important than the role. Now what I'm saying to you is, as you go out and work with your team, for example, if this is my team right here, if this is my team, what I have to understand is, what's your name?
Missy.
Okay, Missy, what's your name?
Fran.
Fran?
Chris.
Okay, if I've got Missy, Fran, and Chris, and they're all on my team, and I'm doing the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, maybe Fran is better at the law of navigation than me. So when I come to the law of navigation, when we have to navigate something, we have to go from point A to point B to point C to point D. Now when that happens, gang, here's what I do. Do I have the role of the leader? Of course. I'm maybe the owner of the company. Maybe I'm, quote, the boss. I'm the founder. I don't know who I am, but I'm that head hoopah, okay? But when it comes to navigation, if from a 1 to a 10, I'm a 3, but Fran is a 9, what that means is I give up my role as a leader. And I say, Fran, and I tell the rest of the team, Fran will be leading us. And Fran's going to navigate, and I give the leadership baton to her, and you know what I do? I serve Fran, I follow Fran, I take her directions. Why? Because the goal is more important than the role. Can I tell you something? Many teams suffer indefinitely sometimes because the leader doesn't understand this law. We serve one another, we give, and we take. For example, in the Enjoy group, I have a fellow by the name of John Hall who excels in relationships. He's the best relationship guy on my whole Enjoy group team. He's the president of Equip. So if there's a relationship issue to deal with, guess who I hand the baton off to? I give it to John and say, go for it. I have another guy who's the president of Enjoy Stewardship Services, another company that I have. His name is Dave Sutherland. He is a strategic genius. So if there's strategy to be involved, what do? I take the baton and I hand it off to Dave and I say, you're the strategy guy. Strategically take us to where we need to go. I have another guy who's the president of my organization called Enjoy, named Kevin Small. Kevin is major in looking for opportunities. So when I need an opportunity, when we need to expand, when we need to grow, when we need to flex our muscles, when we need to do a new thing, what do? I take my baton and I say, Kevin, here's the baton. You take it. You're the leader. Tell me what I need to do. I'm following. I'm on your team. Let me support you. How can I serve you? I have a wonderful lady who's been my assistant now for many years named Linda Eggers. She handles all the details of my life. So therefore, when there are details to be handled and arrangements to be made and appointments to be set, what do? I say, Linda, you're the leader. Tell me where to go. And she says, go. Tell me how long to stay. Call me when I should come back. You know, send me a map. You know what I'm saying? She does it all. Why? Why? Because she's better at that than I am. My brother, who excels and has been for many years a successful businessman, when it comes to a business plan, when it comes to somebody to give me strategic advice on the business, I bring Larry into the room and I say, okay, Larry, help me out. How would you do this? And because of his experience and because of his success in business, he says, John, here's the business plan. And he maps it out for me. Why? Because he's better at it than I am. When it comes to consulting people, especially pastors, I've got a guy named Dan Ryan on my team who has for years consulted them. And so when a pastor says, what should I do about this? I say, hey, Dan, here's the baton. Now, here's what I'm saying. It's very important for you as a leader to know all the strengths of your people. It's very important for you to know their temperament. It's very important for you to know their gifts. It's very important for you to know their abilities. And then it's very important for you to utilize them effectively. And you utilize them effectively by passing the baton off them and saying, not saying, well, I'm the leader, so therefore I should always lead. Hello. That's like saying, I'm the leader and I have all the answers. Can I tell you something? I don't want to be on your team. This would not be a very fun team. So in your notes, the law of the big picture basically says successful teams look up at the big picture. That's the first thing they do. Then they size up their situation. Then they line up the needed resources. Then they call up the right team members. Then they give up their personal agenda. And then they step up to the next level. And I love the teamwork thought in your notes. When you see the big picture correctly, you will serve the team more quickly. And then there's always a question in each one of these laws. And here's the question for the big picture. Do I place the team above myself? It's a great question. It's a teamwork question. Today I want to talk to you about teamwork law number 3. It's the law of the niche. N-I-C-H-E. The law of the niche says each player has a place where they add the most value. Isn't that true? Let me tell you how I learned the law of the niche. Now, I'm not going to tell you every law and where I learned it. We don't need to do all that. But the reason the law of the niche is such an important teamwork law to me is this is a law that I didn't learn in my early years. You see, again, my background has been in the church. I was a pastor for 25 years. So, after I graduated from college with a theology degree, I went to my first church and had great expectations about pastoring this church and leading it and growing it and the whole deal. Okay, you can just see, I mean, I just graduated from college, 2 weeks later got married, 2 weeks later I'm at my first assignment, okay? Got the picture. Don't you just feel sorry for the people? Don't you just want to say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But here I am in my first assignment, extremely excited. Now, I did well in college. I was always on the dean's list. In fact, I graduated second in my class. So academics were not a problem. But what I didn't realize when I went to my first church is they didn't train me in the things that I needed to be trained in. Sound familiar? Why would they want to, in college, teach me something that was helpful, practical, and life-changing? I'm kidding. There are many wonderful schools and institutions that do a great job, but I was not trained for my gifts. I was not trained for my strengths. I was not trained for my niche. In fact, the two things that I was trained best in was what I was worst in. I was trained in counseling, and I was trained to administrate. Now, anybody that knows me well just wants to burst out laughing. Because anybody that knows me well knows that I'm not good at counseling, and I'm not good at administration. You know, if you administrate, you ought to do details, and I'm not good at details. I forget things like my name. In fact, the other day, now that my wife Margaret and I are in our 50s, she's in her young 50s. And my buddy down here says, cover. It's too late, it's too late. We were going somewhere the other day, and Margaret and I are forgetting things all the time. So she said, "John, you know what? We need to do teamwork. We need to partner." And I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" And she said, "I tell you what. You remember who you are, and I'll remember where we're going." Now that's how you do teamwork, and it's really helping. It really we miss it sometimes, but we're doing a lot better. Okay. So here I go. I go to my first church, my first assignment, and I know how to. I've been trained in counseling. I've been trained in administration. So what do? I do what I've been trained in. I do counseling. Now, do you understand that if you do something that you're weak in, do you realize it takes energy from you? If you do something and after you're done, you're emotionally drained, it's because you probably aren't doing something that you're good at. So I spend all day counseling those who would come to a 22-year-old, you know what I mean. So I spend all day counseling teenagers anyway. I spend all day counseling, or I spend all day administrating. Now, I'm not good at counseling, I'm not good at administrating. Now, if I'm not good at counseling, I'm not good at administration, the church probably is not going to do real well. Now I'm frustrated. Why am I frustrated? Because I'm saying I'm working hard, I'm diligent, I'm faithful, I have a good motives, but things aren't working well. Well, it's very simple. I'm not in my niche. I'm not doing what I do well. Now, that's been years ago. It took me about 3 years to work through the process that I shouldn't be doing what I don't do well. Let me tell you this. We all have weaknesses. How many of you have at least weakness? One weakness. One weakness. Okay. How many of you are sitting beside a person who would say they have more than one weakness? We all have weaknesses. I have them, you do. Okay. Let me tell you this. When it comes to teamwork, when it comes to your own personal success, you are not going to succeed if you just work on your weaknesses. In other words, if I'm from a 1 to a 10, I'm a 3 at counseling, and I work real hard, the good news is maybe I can get up to a 5. But I'll never get to a 10 because I'm weak in that area. Are you with me? So the problem is so many times we spend too much time on our weaknesses, not enough time on our strengths. That's another day, another topic. But what I want you to know in finding the niche is it took me about 3 years to understand this law. And I began to ask myself, why don't I like pastoring? Why, I like people. I want to help people. Why don't I like this? Well, what I didn't like is I didn't like counseling. I didn't like administration. And it was a wonderful day when I realized I shouldn't counsel. In fact, I remember the day I received total freedom from it, and I stood up in the pulpit and I said, I'm not a good counselor. Now, first of all, that wasn't a revelation to the people. They're looking at each other and saying, thank God he figured that one out. In fact, I said, I'm such a poor counselor, if I need counseling, I wouldn't go to myself. And it was a wonderful day when I looked at my congregation and said, I'm not a good administrator. I'm not good at details. This is not where my strength is. You see, the law of the niche says that if you and I are going to be successful, we have to find our area of strength. And in your notes, the sign of a successful person is that person has found the right place for themselves. You see, you become successful when you find the right place for yourself. The sign of a successful leader is a person that these are people that have found the right place for others. And when you find the right place for others, when you can match their strengths with a part of your job and your business, you'll become successful. One of my favorite people, a wonderful friend, wonderful author, I love reading everything he does, is Chuck Swindoll. And I have in your notes, from Growing Strong in the Seasons of Life, a classic example of what I'm talking about. Once upon a time, the animals decided that they should do something meaningful to meet the problems of the new world, so they organized a school. They adopted an activity curriculum of running, climbing, swimming, and flying, and to make it easier to administer, all the animals took all the subjects. The duck was excellent in swimming. In fact, he was better than his instructor was. However, he made only passing grades in flying and was very poor in running. Since he was so slow in running, he had to drop swimming and stay after school to practice running. This caused his webbed feet to be badly worn, so he became only average in swimming, but average was quite acceptable, therefore nobody worried about it except the duck. The rabbit started at the top of his class in running, but developed a nervous twitch in his leg muscles because he had so much makeup work to do in swimming. And the squirrel was excellent in climbing, but he encountered constant frustration in flying class because his teacher made him start from the ground up instead of the treetop down. He developed Charlie horses from overextension, so he only got a C in climbing and a D in running. The eagle was a problem child. He was severely disciplined for being a nonconformist. In climbing classes, he beat all the others to the top, but insisted on using his own way of getting there. What's the moral of this story? What Chuck is really trying to say is this: everybody is a 10 somewhere. And the job of the leader, as he or she brings the team together, is to find out where your people are a 10 and put them in the area of their strength, not their weakness. Classic example. When I played basketball in high school, we had a wonderful coach who was very wise. And in the first day of basketball practice, Coach Neff would bring us together, and he would say, now, many of you probably would like to play a position that you're not fitted for. So he said, what we're going to do the very first day is I'm going to put you in a position that you're not gifted in and let you see what happens when you play it. I can remember one year, especially because in physical education, I had played on an intramural team, and I got to play center, and I thought I was a good center. Now, there's a problem. A 6-foot center is not a good center. And I remember telling the coach, I'd like to play center. Now, so instead of playing the guard position that I normally would play on the team, I remember him putting me at the center position against a guy by the name of Doug, who was 6'7". Needless to say, I continually ate the basketball. Why? I was out of position. I can't play center. Now see, what a leader does is a leader wisely understands that what he or she must do is must put the people in the right position. Because when you're out of position, you'll never be successful. As a pastor, one of my desires was for everybody in the congregation to do the same thing. I thought everybody ought to do the same thing. It shows unity. I know you're sitting there right now and saying, what a stupid man. And then you're saying, why am I taking notes from him? Because I thought everybody ought to be in the same position, ought to kind of play the same position, and kind of ought to do the same thing. And obviously, after a few years, I found that doesn't work. Why? It's very simple. Very simple. The law of the niche says that every person has a place where they bring the most value. And what a leader does is a leader understands that. And that's why I love this teamwork thought that says, you are most valuable where you add the most value. So, what do I do as a leader? As a leader, again, I walk among the team. And as I walk among the team, I begin to relate to them, I begin to connect with them, and I'm always asking myself the question, what is their strength? What's your name?
Doug.
Doug, okay. What's your name?
Richard.
Richard. What's your name?
David.
David.
Yule.
Yule. Now, so as a leader, I'm saying, okay, what is Yule's strength? What's Doug's strength? What's Richard's strength? Now, here's what I do. Here's what I do. A leader of a team is like a quarterback. The quarterback doesn't run the ball every time. In fact, the quarterback seldom calls his own signal. When we get in the huddle, I assess where we are on the field, how much distance we have to go, and then I look at my team and I say, which one of these players has the best opportunity to advance the ball for a first down or for hopefully even maybe sometime a touchdown? And if I come to the conclusion that it's Yule that has the best opportunity to get us where we need to go, then I call his number and I hand the ball off to Yule. The rest of us, we block, we do everything we can to help Yule be successful. If I think it's Doug, I hand the ball off to Doug. Very simply, what I need to do is I need to know the niche of all my players. Now I've got a question to ask you. In fact, I have a couple questions. Question number one, if you're a team leader, the question I have to ask you is, do you know the strengths of all your people? Do you know their niche? Do you know where they are a 10? Because the success of your team will be based upon your ability to put the 10s in the right place. But I have another question. This is for the teammates, the team players. The question is, as you play on the team, do you know the strength of the person beside you? Do you know what they do well? Because what I have found is that if you know the strength of the person beside you, if you know what they do well, you begin to develop an appreciation for that teammate and for that team player. Does that make sense? So here's the way it works. The leader must know where a player adds the most value. And the reason that's important is for decision making. Until, as a leader, I know the place where a person adds the most value, I won't be able to make good decisions on where to put them. The player must know where he or she adds the most value because it will help them in understanding. And then the teammates, they must know where the other players add the most value because it adds to the appreciation of the moment. And I want to make one more thought because this is so important when it comes to learning this law, because the law of the niche is a very vital law. We've already studied law number 2 of teamwork, which is the law of the big picture. The big picture gives you vision, but the law of the niche gives you value. So when you're getting the best out of your team, they derive their value from knowing what their strength is, by knowing their niche. Does that make sense? Several years ago, I read a book called Personality Plus by Florence Littauer. It's a book on the temperaments. It's a book on melancholies and sanguines and cholerics and phlegmatics. And basically, it's a very good, well-written book, humorous book, which basically helps you see every personality and every temperament as it is. It was revealing. It was helpful to me. You know why? Because up to that point, me being a choleric, kind of a bossy leader type, I kind of thought everybody ought to be like me. And if they weren't like me, I kind of always said, what's wrong with them? But I can still remember in Southern California on the beach right by the Hotel Del in Coronado, Margaret and I laying on the sand, and she read that book to me one day, Personality Plus. And all of a sudden I realized that people are not right and wrong many times, they're just different. And you become a successful team and you become a successful leader when you value those differences, when you appreciate those differences, when you complement those differences. And that's what the law of the niche is. The law of the niche question is, what do I do best? What do I do better than anyone else on the team? Because whatever it is, that's what I ought to be doing. Today I would like to talk to you about the Law of Mount Everest. That's law number 4 in the Law of Teamwork. And the Law of Mount Everest says, as the challenge escalates, the need for teamwork elevates. In fact, in your notes, I want to make sure you get this. This law is about gathering and growing a team to accomplish something big. This is a law about gathering your team and growing your team so that you can do a Mount Everest project. Now, let me apply the law of Mount Everest this way. If you're just going to climb a hill, now we're doing this taping today in Atlanta, and Atlanta's got a few hills. It's got Stone Mountain. It's not a big mountain. I mean, I suppose in about an hour and a half, if you want to, you can climb it. If you want to go climb Stone Mountain, you can do that on your own. Isn't that true? You know, just put on your sneakers, put on your jogging outfit, your shorts or whatever, and go over there and just start at the bottom, and about an hour and a half later, you'll be at the top of Stone Mountain. So if you want to climb Stone Mountain, you can do that on your own. In fact, can I tell you something? You don't need a team. You don't need to look around and say, you know what? Today I'm going to climb Stone Mountain. And I think I need you to come along, and we need to get some ropes. And no. If you're going to climb Stone Mountain, you can do that on your own. But the law of Mount Everest says, if you're going to climb Mount Everest, if you're going to tackle something really big, you're going to have a team. And you're not only going to have to gather a team, you're going to have to grow a team. You're not going to have to get people around you. See, if you're going to climb Mount Everest, if I'm going to climb Mount Everest, if I'm going to climb Mount Everest, I don't just go to any group and say, hey, gang, I'm going to fly over and climb Mount Everest, and I want you to be on my team. Now, that's not the way you do it. I may not want them on the team. I mean, hello? What's your name?
Ron.
Ron may not like heights. That's a drawback. So if I'm going to climb Mount Everest, it's just not like getting people together. It's getting the right people together. So it's not only gathering a team, it's also growing a team. Now, the law of Mount Everest begs for 3 questions. Question number 1. What is my dream? You got to start there. And let me just say this, for some of you in the room, some of you watching this training video on teamwork, for some of you, you don't need to go to number 2 or 3. Because your dream is so small, it's not Mount Everest. You follow me? It's kind of like exist. Breathe. See. Walk. So if you don't have a big goal or a big dream, you don't need to fill in the next 2 things. But you got to ask yourself, what is my dream? That's the first Mount Everest question that you have to ask yourself. Do I have a little dream? Do I have a big dream? Do I have an impossible dream? What kind of dream do I have? Okay, that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, who's on my team? Once I have established what my dream is, the next important question is, who's on my team? For example, let's go back to my illustration a moment ago. Let's say I'm going to climb Mount Everest. That's really my dream. I want to climb Mount Everest. Okay. And Ron here, I bring him on my team, and he doesn't like heights. He not only doesn't like heights, he's now telling me he doesn't like cold weather. And then he says, you know, John, I'm not trying to add problems to this issue, but I also am quite clumsy. Now, the reason I'm having fun here is, you see, if you've got a Mount Everest dream, you have to understand, you've got to answer the question, who's on my team? I know people who have a Mount Everest dream and they've got a Disneyland team. Are you with me? You see, if your team is not the team it needs to be, your dream will never be accomplished. That's why many times people say, oh, if you just have a dream, you're going to go to the top. Oh, if you just get a dream, you got a dream. And, you know, they put their dream on the refrigerator or wherever it is. Can I tell you something? Take it off. Some of you don't have a dream, you're just smoking something. The question you got to ask yourself is not what my dream is. The question is, do I have a team that can get me to the dream? If you don't have a team that can get you to the dream, you're in trouble. So when you've got this Mount Everest challenge in front of you, you ask yourself, what is my dream? And then you ask yourself, who's on my team? And then you ask a very important third question. That is, what should my dream team look like? And question number 3, the one we just dealt with, answered and fulfilled correctly, makes question number 1 a reality. When I can answer and fulfill what my dream team should look like, then I'm going to accomplish my dream. The number 1 reason people never accomplish their dream is not because it's not real. I wouldn't want to make fun of anybody. You know what? The saddest thing to me is that people every day die with the dream still inside. That's sad. But the reason they did not accomplish the dream is not because it wasn't a good dream or not because it wasn't even for them. They didn't accomplish the dream because they never built a team around them. So, how do you develop a dream team? If you've got a Mount Everest dream, how do you put together a Mount Everest team? Number 1, know what leaders look like. If you're going to develop a dream team, you want to bring a high caliber of leader on your team. So you've got to know what a leader looks like. Now, everywhere I teach leadership, people ask me the question all the time. They'll say, John, how do I find a leader? And it's a good question because leaders aren't hard to find. They're hard to find. Isn't that true? I mean, non-leaders, they're not hard to find. They're everywhere. I mean, that's why, you know, turkeys flock. Eagles, you got to find them one at a time. So if I told you leave the studio and go out and find a leader, it'd take you a while. So what does a leader look like? And you can't find a leader until you know what a leader looks like. When I go to the airport many times, if where I'm speaking or whom I'm speaking to, they know me by reputation, but they've never seen me. It's interesting, the pickup at the airport. Because there are basically 2 kinds of people that pick me up. First of all, there's the person who is at the airport, and what they do is they get a piece of paper, something like this, and they'll scribble my name on it, and they'll be in the crowd with, you know, Mr. Maxwell, you know what I mean, John Maxwell. They'll have this thing up here, and basically that kind of person basically says, I'm standing in the crowd. Here's your name. Find me. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't look hard. Sometimes I just go straight to a taxi. Go to my hotel and say, I'm in my room, you find me. In other words, there are some people, when they're looking for me, they put my name on a piece of paper, and basically they say, it's your responsibility to find me. Isn't that true? Now there are other people, when they come and pick me up at the airport, they're not like that at all. What they are is is they'll have they'll be in the crowd, all right, but they'll have a book maybe of mine that has my picture. And hopefully it's a recent book. and what they'll do is they'll have the book open and have my picture there, and they'll be standing kind of right on the edge of the crowd where the passengers are coming out, and they'll be looking at this picture, and they'll be looking at people coming off the plane, and they'll be doing this number. And all of a sudden they'll smile and they see me. You know what I'm saying? They say, hey, hi, and they'll introduce themselves, and they grab hold of me. Now, you know what? That kind of person, they say, I'm responsible to find you. Two types of people. Now, what I'm saying to you is if you're going to develop a dream team, let me tell you what will never happen to you. Dream teams will not come to you. Don't stand on the corner and say, here I am. Here I am. Come one, come all. Here I am. Find me. Opportunity is sitting right here. No, no. If you're going to develop a dream team, you've got to go out and get them. And let me just say three things about leaders. One, leaders are hard to find because there's not an abundance of them. In fact, I've never seen an abundance of leaders anywhere. When I speak for companies and corporations all over America, I have never gone to the president or CEO of a company and had them look at me and say, John, we're delighted you're here. We do have a problem. What's the problem? Well, we have too many leaders in this organization. We have too many great leaders. My goodness, we're just loaded up with leaders, and we have a leadership glut in our organization. Never have I found that. Why? Every organization I know, every business I know, every government agency I know, every church I know, they don't have enough leaders. Why? Leaders are hard to find. Not only are they hard to find, leaders are hard to gather. Once you find them, it's not easy to gather those people. Why? Because they have their own mind. They have their own agenda. So you go over to a leader. What's your name, sir? Jimmy. I go over to Jimmy and I say, Jimmy, come on, join my team. Now, if Jimmy's a leader, Jimmy just doesn't jump in line. Hut 2, 3, 4, hut 2, 3, 4, hut 2, 3. You know, Jimmy, he doesn't even move. He's the leader. He looks at me and says, he starts asking me questions. He says, where are you going? How long are you going to be there? What you going to do when you get there? Can I drive? Why? Because Jimmy is a leader. So they're not only hard to find, they're hard to gather. Now followers, they're easy to find and they're easy to gather. In fact, if you're just moving, followers just get in line. Where are you going? Beats me. When you coming back? Don't have a clue. What's your goal? Hope there's a water fountain at the end of the line. Leaders are hard to find, leaders are hard to gather, and thirdly, leaders are hard to keep. You don't keep leaders. I mean, they just don't hang around, especially if you're bad. Leaders don't wait around for your day to come. If you're making it happen, if you're going somewhere and you're doing something, they're on the team. But I mean, the moment it gets a little plateauish and the moment it gets a little bit slack, they're out of there. Isn't that true? So, to develop a dream team, you've got to know what a leader looks like. You've got to be able to see them coming. How many times have we looked at opportunity and it's passed us, and as soon as it passes us, we say, oh my goodness, I wish I would have done that. Now, why is it we're so good when opportunity passes? It's very simple. We didn't know what it looked like when it was coming. If you want to develop a dream team, number 2, you have to show potential leaders how to lead. In other words, you have to model leadership for them. You see, I found out a long time ago, we teach what we know, but we reproduce what we are. That's why I always say a leader develops a leader. A non-leader doesn't develop leaders. Takes one to know one, takes one to grow one, takes one to show one. So you want to model leadership. People do what people see. And thirdly, if you really want to develop a dream team, you need to grow leaders through training. You need to spend time growing the people around you. Let me explain it this way. The most appreciable asset that you have in your company are the players around you. And as you look at your team, as you evaluate your team, what you want to do more than anything else is you want to train your people, you want to believe in your people. In fact, I've always said, put a 10 on their head. Put a 10 on their head. Communicate to them like they're a 10. Treat them like they're a 10. Believe in them like they're a 10. Put a 10 on their head. Because here's what I want you to know. The people on your team have potential to grow. In fact, let me say this as a leader. If the people on your team today are the same that they were last year, you haven't done your job. And to all the team players, I want to say this to you. If you're the same today as you were a year ago, you haven't done your job. Does that make sense? Now, the Law of Mount Everest says, when you have this humongous goal or dream in front of you, the need for teamwork escalates as the challenge elevates. The Law of Mount Everest says, the bigger the challenge, the better the team. So what you do is, you don't go after the big dream first. You go off of you start developing the team first. And as they're capable, then you go after the big dream. Love this story. It's a Mount Everest story, but it'll work real good here. A true story of a guide who took a team to go to the top of Mount Everest, got in a major storm. They got about 2/3 of the way up, had to go back down. And obviously, because everybody flew in, great expense, great training, a lot of time and effort, everybody was disappointed. So the guide, knowing the disappointment of the team and knowing they didn't get to the top, said, before we go home tomorrow, we'll have dinner at the lodge tonight. And they had dinner. And it was kind of a somber mood. The people were, well, they were just disappointed. And so after their meal together, and it was kind of a low-key evening, the guide stood up in front of them and said, before we leave, he said, I want to share something with you. Now, right behind him on the wall in this lodge was a major picture of Mount Everest. In fact, it was as big as the wall. And as he was addressing the people that didn't make it to the top, he turned his back to them and he looked at this picture. And he began to talk to Mount Everest. And here's what he said. He said, Mount Everest, I want to say something to you tonight. We tried to climb to the top. We tried to conquer you. And we failed. We had to come back down. Mount Everest, I want you to know today you defeated us. But Mount Everest, I want to say something else. We're coming back again next year. And Mount Everest, I want you to know when we come back next year and endeavor to climb to your top next year, I want you to know that we will defeat you next year, Mount Everest. And let me tell you why. Because Mount Everest, you're as big as you're ever going to get. But the people on this team, we can get bigger. And that's the Law of Mount Everest. Gather your team and grow your team. And then take on that big dream and go all the way to the top. Today I want to talk to you about law number 5 of teamwork. This is called the law of the chain. And the law of the chain says the strength of the team is impacted by its weakest link. Now, of all the laws I'm going to teach, of the 17, this law is the most difficult for people to accept. This is going to drain you a little bit emotionally, okay? And I'm just setting you up for this because when you begin to talk about looking at your team, evaluating your team, and then you begin to kind of hone in on who is the weakest link. Kind of reminds you of a TV show, doesn't it, huh? I thought about for this law having that lady come, you know what I mean? And I thought, no, she is disgusting. There's not a leadership bone in her body. She has the gift of separation. And so we won't bring her here. But when you talk about the weakest link, this is a tough law emotionally to accept. And I want to say this. This is a tough law for me to handle. And let me tell you why. I only have one goal in life, and it's kind of a very simple goal. People ask me what I do sometimes. It's kind of hard to explain because, I mean, what do you do when when I just went to England, I had to, you write all this information down and for the customs people, and, what do I tell them I do? I could tell them I speak, but they look at you and they say, well, I speak too, you can say I write, and they say, well, I write too, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a little bit hard. And somebody asked me, they say, well, what do you do? And I keep thinking, okay, what do I do? And then I said, I think what I do is I add value to people. That's what I do. I take people wherever they are, and I do my best to come alongside of them, train, equip, teach them, simplify the lessons very easy, and lift them to a higher level. I want to add value to people. Now, you take a person like myself that their goal is to add value to people, and you start talking about this law, the law of the weakest link. This is a very difficult law for me because I want everybody to succeed. Not only do I want everybody to succeed, I want to take everybody on the journey with me. In fact, this is a huge weakness in my life. And let me just take a moment and explain this to you, because what happens is I'm always going somewhere. I'm leading something. So my tendency is when I'm leading something is I want to gather everybody around me. You follow me? And so I want to take it. What's your name?
Maggie.
Okay, I want to say, okay, Maggie, I want you to get on the team. And I met Gene earlier. Gene, I want you to get on the team. Okay, so my tendency is to get them all on the boat. You follow me? Get them all on the train, and then I take off with them. Now, every once in a while, you have to stop the train for a little rest break or whatever. Now what happens is when I stop on my journey, sometimes Maggie or Gene, they get off. You follow what I'm saying? And they get off, and they decide to have a picnic there, and finally I say, well, it's time to get on the train, and they don't want to get on the train. Now, here's where my weakness is. Way too much in my life, I try to convince Gene and Maggie to get back on the train. Now, why? Because I want everybody to take the journey with me. I happen to think that where I'm going is a wonderful place. And I also happen to think that everybody wants to pay the price to get there. And everybody wants to take the trip. And my wife, Margaret, has been huge in this area. She's really, this has been a lifelong challenge for me. Because she says, John, quit trying to put everybody on the train. Quit trying to take everybody on the journey with you. And I think, but Margaret, if they had any idea where we were going and what we were accomplishing and what we were doing, they'd want to get on the train. And she says, no, John, not everybody wants to take the trip. Now, the law of the weakest link basically says on any team, there's somebody that probably doesn't want to take the trip. I can still remember when this law vividly hit me. It would be back in the late 1970s, and I was getting ready to make a job transition. And I had a marvelous assistant that just was very helpful to me. And so when I was going to move geographically to another state, because the two of us had such a great relationship, I said, I called her by name. I said, Dee, you're going to want to come with me. And she said, yeah, I think we do. And so her and her husband went to the city, looked for houses. And basically, I felt probably were going to come with me. And I'll never forget calling from the Chicago O'Hare Airport back to Ohio, where at that time we lived, getting ready to move to Indiana, calling Dee and telling her I just had been to the place where we were going. And I was all excited. I was telling her. And she was very quiet. And all of a sudden, I thought, there's something wrong. And I never will forget that she, on the other end, said, John, she said, we've decided we're not going to take that journey. And I remember how crushed I was. I thought, oh my goodness, I want to take her on this trip. I want him to kind of go to the top with me. Now, let me say three things about the journey. Number one, not everyone will take the journey with you. That's just a fact. In fact, in the little blank beside that, put the word choice. People choose different trips. Number two, not everyone should take the journey with you. And beside that, put ability. Some people have abilities that really, or giftedness that really just doesn't allow them to take that trip. Thirdly, not everyone can take the trip with you and put potential there. Now, what I want you to know about the journey, what I want you to know about this law of the chain is that as you take the team, as you go for the top, as you go for the gold, when you take the team on this trip, I promise you there will be a person that will lag behind. And I want to give you some characteristics of, for lack of a better word, this weaker team member. Now, let me just say something before I talk about characteristics of a weaker team member, because this kind of bothers me a little bit. I'm not talking about the fact that the person is wrong. And in another area, they may be very strong. But what I'm saying is, on your team, you're going to have maybe more than one weak link. You're going to have a couple people that are just not probably carrying their weight. Does that make sense? Let me give you characteristics of this person that is what I call the weak link in the chain. This person is unable to keep pace with the other team members. In other words, they just have a hard time keeping up. In fact, when I was working this law, several months ago before the book was out and before the training of the kid, I almost called this law the law of the turtle. Because they were just, I wanted to talk about a person who couldn't keep pace with the rest of them, but then I thought, the weak link is a much better description of what I'm trying to describe. But they're unable to keep pace with the other team members. Secondly, they're unable to grow in their area of responsibility. In other words, when you place them in their area of responsibility, there's probably not much growth potential there. Number three, they're unable to see the big picture. Most of the time, a weak link team member doesn't see the big picture and constantly loses perspective. Number four, they're unable to fulfill the expectations given to them. There's a certain amount of expectations placed perhaps in that job or responsibility they have. They're just, they come up short. Now notice the first four, we talk about unable. We talk about ability. The last two talk, I think, much more about attitude. They're unwilling to work on their personal weaknesses. In other words, they're unwilling to show up the areas where they're perhaps not strong. And finally, they're unwilling to work with the other team members, which is almost always the ultimate issue of having to remove a weak link when somehow they don't gel with the rest of the team. Now, I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about the weak link and what to do with that situation a little bit later in this law. But I have to find a way to graphically, for you and for the people that we're training in the teamwork laws, I have to graphically find a way to show you how the weak link hurts the team. And the best way to do it is in your notebook, where I illustrate the law of the change by numbers. And this is very simple. It's right in front of you. Let me just walk you through it. Okay, here you've got a team that you've brought together. And you have 5 team members. Let's say the first team, they're all strong members. You have 5 10s, 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10. Okay, that equals 50. You have a 10 average. But let's say on the team you have 4 10s and then you have 1 5, a weak link. Now look what happens immediately to the team. 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 5 equal 45, which is a 9 average. Now what's happened is you've reduced the team's effectiveness by 10%. In other words, the weak link has begun to drag the team. Instead of that person being the wind beneath your wings, they become the anchor on your boat. But let's talk about a team the way team really works. Because if you've really got a team and it's full of synergy and you put it together and it's doing well, what happens is then a team multiplies, not adds. So let's multiply these team members for a moment. Let's say you have a great team. 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 equals 100,000. But let's say you've got synergy on this team, but you have 1 weak link. Now watch what happens. 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 5 equal 50,000. The weak link has reduced the team 50%. This is huge. Now, let me tell you what we do with a weak link, because I've done this all the time. I mean, I'm not talking to you from what I've read. I'm talking to you what I've done, okay? What I had a tendency to do is, if I had a weak link, instead of removing them off the team, I thought, I'll just give them another job. In other words, instead of removing them, I move them around. So let me show you what happens when you take that 5 and move them around. How are we doing, gang? Do you realize that 5 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 is the same as 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 5? In other words, when it's all done, you still have the same result. Why? Because you have a weak link. And note in your workbook, if they are truly a weak link, no matter where you place them, the result will be negative. And the teamwork thought I want you to have here on the weak link is, the team cannot continually cover up its weaknesses. If you've heard me teach much on priorities, one of the things you hear me teach is a principle that I just truly believe in. It's called the Pareto Principle, which is sometimes known as the 20-80 principle. And to just reduce this for teaching purposes and illustration purposes, the Pareto Principle basically is this: that if you have 10 people in your organization, and you evaluate them and you size them up, that number 1 is truly the best player on the team, and number 2 is the second best player, all the way down to number 10 is the weak link. Okay, we think? Now the Pareto basically says, if you take the top 2 people in your organization, not if you've got 10, but you just take the top 2, the top 2 out of the 10 will give you 80% of everything you need in your organization. In other words, the top 20% will give you the 80% return that you want. That's what we call the 20-80 principle. That's what we call the Pareto Principle. I teach it in depth. Sometimes it's a 2-hour lecture. Okay. What I'm teaching you here on the law of the weak link is the 20-80 principle in reverse. Very simply, what happens is, instead of giving the top 20% of the people in your organization 80% of your time and effort, guess what happens? We normally give the bottom 20% of the people on our team 80% of our time, energy, and money. Isn't that true? I mean, watch it. I mean, you're just sitting there and who takes your time? The person that doesn't produce. Who has the questions? And what do? We spend all of our time. And by the way, let me just stop here now. This is huge. The difference between counseling your team and equipping your team is this: when you counsel your team, you work with the weaker members. When you equip your team, you work with the stronger members. If you counsel a team in their weakness, you'll never make your team strong. You've never counseled a team into strength. Because what do? You counsel a person according to their weakness. You equip a team strong. So what we need to do is spend 80% of our time with the top 20%, not 80% of our time with the bottom 20%, but sadly, because of the weak link, and because of the attention they need, and the time they need, and the resources they need, and the money they need, and the energy they sap up, we spend too much time on the weak links. We spend too much time on the weaker members. Let me illustrate. I don't think I've ever gone to a horse race, although I've always wanted to go to the Kentucky Derby. I've always wanted to go there. My wife's wanted to go there and wear the hat. Okay, anyway. I don't think I've ever been to a horse race, but I don't know a lot about horse racing, except the one across the line first wins. I know that. But let's say I went to a horse race, and I went up to the a place where you can place a bet. And so I go up to the agent, and I say, okay, I'd like to place $20. And let me ask you a question, sir. Do you have a horse that's never won a race? The guy says, well, yeah. I said, there's a couple in this race that have never won. I want to place $20 on a horse that's never won. And the guy's looking at him, and he's already thinking, what's wrong with this guy? What's he doing this for? And then I said, well, the reason I want to do this is I want to help their self-image. Now, why is it somebody at a racetrack would know I was stupid? But leaders working with teams all the time place their $20 on people that can't win. This is huge. It's the law of the weak link. And let's say, for example, on our team, and I'm the leader, there is a weak link. Let me give you some observations for your notes, because this will really help you. Until the weak link situation is corrected. Number one, the stronger members will identify the weaker one. They always do. I promise you, you go home to your team right now in the business, and if you could have a candid conversation and say, on the team, who's the weak link? Can I tell you something? All the people that are strong already know who the weak link is. In fact, leaders evaluate very quickly. Leaders walk into the room and in 5 minutes size up the situation. They already figured who can, who can't, who should, who shouldn't, who will, who won't. Leaders evaluate very quickly. So if you go home to your team, it's not like if you tell them who the weak link is, it's going to be a discovery for them. You walk in and say, I just want you to know, Charlie's the weak link on the team. The rest of your members aren't going to say, you're kidding. Never entered my mind that we're dragging Charlie. Never entered my mind. Observation number two, until the weak link situation is corrected, the stronger members will have to help the weaker one. In fact, let me put it this way. Well, number three will do it better. The stronger members, until the weak link situation is corrected, will become less effective. Why will they become less effective? Very simple. Because they're having to help Charlie. Number four, and this will always happen, until the weak link situation is corrected, the stronger members will resent the weaker one. After a while, they'll resent this person because they realize they are not able to give their best all the time because they have to cover for somebody else. And number five, the stronger members, hang on now, will question the leader's discernment and courage. Wow. All the team members, listen to me. If you're a leader of a team, let me tell you something. If you aren't taking care of the weak link issue on your team, I want to tell you something. The rest of the team members are looking at you, leader, and they're saying, when is my leader either going to discern this problem or when are they going to have courage to take care of it? In fact, let me say this. Your respect as a leader will be lessened if you don't deal with this situation. Number six, until the weak link situation is corrected, the weaker members will take more time than the stronger ones. That's just a fact. And until the weak link situation is corrected, the weaker members will want to hold on to their position. Oh boy, now let me tell you a fact about the weak link. They tenaciously want to hold on to their position. You do understand that, don't you? You know, you take a stronger member of the team, I don't mean this wrong, stronger member of the team, they always have places to go. And I mean, you say, no longer can we use you. They're saying, that's all right, I had 4 other options. In fact, there's some things, I got a Mount Everest myself I'd like to climb, and off they go. You don't never worry about the strong ones. They always have options. Leaders always have options. But if a person is the weak link, they don't have options usually. And they're the ones that hold on to tenure. They're the ones that hold on to title. They're the ones that hold on to position. They guard that sucker with their life. One more thought. Until the weak link situation is corrected, number 8, the weaker members will control the relationship. And let me just say one thing about relationships and we'll wrap this law up, and it's very simple. Here it is. The weaker person always controls the relationship. The stronger one always has to give in, always has to go the second mile, turn the other cheek. Isn't this true? It's true in marriage, it's true in business. The weaker person controls the relationship. So when you have a weak link situation, many times the rest of the team is being controlled by the weaker person. And therefore, they're not effective. And the law of the chain question, a very simple one. Am I helping the team or am I hurting the team? Today I want to talk to you about law number 6 of the laws of teamwork. It's called the law of the catalyst. And the law of the catalyst says winning teams have players that make things happen. In other words, catalysts are what I call get it done and then some people. That's just who they are. And by the way, by now in the training videos and in the studio here today, you're probably feeling pretty good. Because you've got 5 teamwork laws under your belt. And you already feel like you're a better team player. Isn't that true, huh? I mean, you just say, oh, this is huge. How many of you just feel you're probably a little bit better now than you were a while ago? Raise your hand. Oh, yeah, that's good, good. Can I tell you something? You're not that good yet. You've got 12 laws to go. So look at your neighbor and say, you're good, but not that good. All right, huh? Okay. One of the privileges I have in teaching leadership for companies and organizations is every once in a while I get to do something that's really a lot of fun. And this year I was able to go to Washington, D.C. and do the NBA All-Star Game. And being a basketball fan, this was fun. Okay, and so I went and spoke to the players and some of the personnel in basketball. And when I finished speaking, Ed Rush, who's the head of the NBA officials, came up to me and introduced himself, and he said, John, he said, we take your book, The 21 Qualities of a Leader, and that's the book we train all of our NBA refs. And you're our mentor. And it's so fun. I said, oh, good, wonderful. And he said, we want to take you to lunch. I said, even more wonderful. He said, we're going to buy. I said, this is really wonderful. and so I went to lunch with half a dozen NBA refs. And so we had a great time, and they asked me a lot of questions on leadership, and they started asking me things about teamwork because they knew it back then that I was writing this book. In fact, we're going to do training with the NBA refs in the area of teamwork and have some fun there. But we had a wonderful, wonderful lunch, probably about a 2.5-hour lunch, of which I said, I don't get this opportunity to have NBA refs around me all the time. So I said, I've got some questions, basketball questions. And so, of course, me loving sports and basketball, I began to really ask some questions. And one of the questions I asked is, I said, who is the greatest player to ever play in the NBA? And to a man, all 6 of them looked at me, and basically it said the same thing. Do you want us to exclude Michael Jordan? And all of a sudden I realized there were great NBA players, but these NBA refs set Michael Jordan off clear to the side because he was in a class all by himself. Now, as I probed them a little bit about what made Michael Jordan great, they said more than his skills, more than his giftedness, more than his athletic ability, more than his leaping ability, more than his all this stuff. They said what made Michael Jordan great is that if you were on Michael Jordan's team, in fact, one of the NBA refs said, think about it, John, you're in the NBA Finals, and Michael Jordan is one of your teammates. He said, you knew deep down inside you were going to win. You knew somehow, some way, that guy was going to be the catalyst on the team and bring your team to victory. And I can still remember watching them play Utah a couple of years ago with my son, Joe Porter, and the game was very close, and it was down to the last few seconds, and the Chicago Bulls had the ball, and I said, Joel, I will guarantee you something. He said, what's that, Dad? I said, I will guarantee you Michael Jordan will shoot the ball, and I'll guarantee you he'll make the basket. That's exactly what happened. Why? Because Michael Jordan is a catalyst. Now, every team, to be effective, has to have that person that you just get the ball to. And here's the way I want to explain the catalyst for you. On your team, on the team that you're on, when the chips are down or where the basket needs to be made or the goal needs to be reached, who's the player that you give the ball to? That's the catalyst player. For example, the president of our Enjoy Stewardship Service Company is a man by the name of David Sutherland. And David Sutherland is not only the leader, the president of the team, he's a major catalyst. Let me explain. Several years ago, Enjoy Stewardship Services is a company that helps churches raise money for building programs, debt, retirement. And we have a goal. Within a couple of years, we will in 1 year raise over $1 billion for local congregations. So God's blessed us, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Okay, but back way back 6 years ago, when this company was just being started and Dave was ahead of it, if we did 30 churches a year, we were excited. And I'll never forget, in December, the 1st December, I was going through the office one day, and I saw his wife, Roxine, and I said, Roxine, where's Dave? I haven't seen him for a couple of days. Oh, she said, John, she said, he's on the road. I said, what's he doing? And she said, well, he has this goal of how many organizations he wants to help raise money this year. He has this goal, this number. And she said, he's short of the goal. And so she said, a couple days ago he left, and he said, Roxine, I haven't met my goal yet. I'll come home when I've met my goal. So she said, I don't know, 2 days, 2 weeks, who knows? But she said, here's what I want you to know. She said, I've lived with him now, she said, for several years. She said, here's what when he comes home, he will have hit his goal. That's a catalyst. A person that is going to make it happen. So let me give you the characteristics of a catalyst. There are 9 of them. Number 1, intuitive. In other words, they sense things that others do not sense that makes the team successful. There's an intuitiveness about them. By the way, the best leaders, the natural leaders, the, quote, born leaders, have an intuitiveness within them. In fact, the one law of the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the one law that separates the natural-born gifted leader from the non-natural-born gifted leader is the law of intuitiveness. Intuitiveness comes with natural leadership skills. So they sense things that others do not sense. Secondly, they're communicators. They say things that others do not say that makes the team successful. And again, Winston Churchill is such a hero of mine and such a great leader. In the days when Nazi Germany was beginning to invade the other European countries, the present Prime Minister of England said there's no need to worry, he'll never come to England. Winston Churchill was the only voice that said we need to worry, we need to be concerned. This man won't stop. He's going to conquer England if we don't do something. And what is that? That's a catalytic call. That's a catalytic communicator who when everybody else is saying one thing says, no, 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 you don't understand. This is the way we got to go. This is what we got to do. This is what I want you to see. They're communicators that say things that others do not say. Again, always to make the team successful. Notice this. You'll see on every phrase, always to make the team successful. I'm not saying they say things others do not say. I know all kinds of people say things others do not say, and there's nothing catalytic about them. Some of them are just downright complainers. So just because you don't say, well, I say things different than everybody, I must be a catalyst. No, you may be obnoxious. You understand, you say things that others do not say to make the team successful. You sense things that others do not sense to make the team successful. The third characteristic of a catalyst leader is they are initiators. They do things that others do not do that makes the team successful. They initiate. You don't have to tell them. They're already there. In fact, I've always said, you show me a person that can initiate, and you show me a person that can close. And you've got the bookends of success right there. But catalytic people are initiators. Number 4, they're passionate. They feel things that others do not feel. Again, that makes the team successful. They're passionate. They're like David facing Goliath, looking at the rest of the army of Israel and says, is there not a cause? I mean, he can't understand it. Why aren't you charging the big boy? Why they aren't charging the big boy? Because they think the big boy's going to hurt him. Hello. You see, they saw the big boy and they said, he's so big he's going to hurt us. David saw the big boy and said, he's so big I can't miss. Passion. Catalytic leaders on a team are passionate. Number 5, they're creative. They think things that others do not think that makes the team successful. They're not boxy people. They have no lines. They jump over acceptable norms to get the job done. I mean, they're again, what are they? They are make it happen people. They're catalytic. Number 6, they are givers. They give things that others do not give. That makes the team successful. They are second-mile people, not first-mile people. Second-mile people. My friend Zig Ziglar said, get on the second-mile road because he says there's less traffic there. How true that is. They're givers. They do their part, quote, and then some. Number 7, they're responsible. They carry things that others do not carry that makes the team successful. They carry their load and then some. Number 8, they're gifted. They can do things that others cannot do that makes the team successful. There's a certain ability and giftedness that makes the difference of this team player. And number 9, they're leaders. They influence people that others do not influence that makes the team successful. Now, let's talk about it for a second. In finding a leader, in finding this person that's going to be a catalyst on your team, what I want you to understand is something very simple here. When people ask me to help them get a picture of a leader, one of the first things I share with them about leaders is leaders have the ability to make things happen. That's a fact. Leaders make things happen. In fact, let me put it this way. If you cannot make things happen for yourself, you can't make things happen for others. So the first thing you do when you're looking for a leader is look for somebody who can make things happen. Because if they have the ability to produce, if they have the ability to bring home the bacon, hello? Instead of belch out the bologna? If they can bring it home, if they can do it for themselves, there's a high probability they can do it for others. If you can't do it for yourself, you probably can't do it for others. So catalysts on team, they're going to somehow find a way to get you over the top. A few weeks ago I was in London, and when I was in London, I was with 3 wonderful friends, Andy Steimer, Tim Elmore, and Dan Ryland. Now, Tim and Dan were with me because for 20 years they've been on my team. So 20 years ago we started the journey together, so I said, guys, let's go to London for a week and let's do stuff we like to do. Let's do a little C.S. Lewis study. Let's do some John Wesley stuff. Let's go to some shows. And we had an incredible time. But Dan Ryland is a Beatles fan. So we went to a play of the Beatles, which he loved. It was good. It was a good play. But then the highlight was the last Saturday morning before we were all to take off to go back to the States. Dan said, what we need to do is we've got to go to Abbey Road. And we've got to go, the picture, where the Beatles are crossing the street at Abbey Road. He said, we have got to take this picture at Abbey Road. And I said, yeah, because I love Beatles. So I said, yeah, you're right. We got to go to Abbey Road. And I just volunteered. I said, I'll be the guy that takes the shoes off. You know what I mean? I'll be the barefoot guy. And so we got a taxi cab because our wives want to go. So we got a couple taxi cabs. And so we pull up to Abbey Road, and much to our disappointment, the road's closed. And there's a big truck out there, with the big ladders on it, and there are cones out over the road, and huge sign says road closed. And our cab driver, he pulls up, goes slow, and he says, I'm so sorry. He said, the road's closed. And he started to pull away. I said, stop. Stop. I said, don't go. He said, the road's closed. I said, you don't understand. I said, I think we can make this happen. So I got him to pull over. Now, on the way over, the cab driver told us the whole time we were going over, he kept saying to us, he said, now guys, I don't want to disappoint you, but he said, this is a pretty popular place, and he said, a whole bunch of people will be here, and usually have to stand in line, and everybody's got their cameras, and everybody's doing a little job of going across the street, the whole deal. And so he said, I'm not trying to discourage you, but he said, this may be a long wait. Well, it says road closed. There is no wait. So I said, pull the thing over. So we all get out, and the guys are kind of looking at me and says, guys, hang on. And I go over to the workers of the road, the guys over there that put out all the cones and were, basically doing what the workers of the road do, standing at the side of the road. And I said, guys, you have an incredible opportunity today. They said, what's that? I said, I know it says road closed, but I said, we came from the States, and we love the Beatles. And we want to take a picture and you have an opportunity to make it happen. And I said, all we need to do is move the cones out of the way. And I said, move the truck back just a little bit. Kind of position it in the right place in the road, because one of the things we had talked about at dinner the night before is, if you look at the photo album of the Beatles going across Abbey Road, it's one that's looking down on the Beatles. It's not one on the street level. And so the night before we were talking about how it was going to be tough to get the picture the way it's supposed to be, because we didn't have any way to go kind of top down. And when I saw the truck, the ladder, I realized that this is the way that we would get the picture from the top down. So I told him, I said, we'll have just to move the truck just a little bit to get the picture top down there, and I said, we'll help you. And the kind of guys are kind of looking at each other. I said, you know, you're not doing anything right now anyway, and no, we're not. And so they started laughing, and they started helping me pick up the cones, and so we're all moving all the stuff out of the way. It's a wonderful experience, and we're having the best time. And Patty Ryland, Dan's wife, I said, now Patty, I said, you get up in the truck here, and then get over here and get the picture. So she gets up in the truck to get the picture just the way it is, and everybody's just having a great time. And I take my shoes off, my socks off, and we get the picture just the way we're supposed to get the picture going across there, and she's up there on top of the truck taking it, and all the guys that are supposed to be working on the road, they're clapping and cheering us on now. And the cab driver, I'll never forget it, the cab driver, when we got back in the cab, looked at Andy Steimer, who was with us, one of the four, and he saw me getting all these workers to help us out, because, well, they are workers, so so he saw me getting all the workers to help us out, and he looked at me, and he pointed to me, and he said to Andy, he said, boy, he said, that guy gets things done, doesn't he? And Andy looked at him and says, you have no idea. We got that picture. We got back in that cab. We laughed. We had the best time all the way back, because we got what we wanted to see happen. And the road workers, they were so happy. They were shaking our hands, telling us that we made their day, because this is a very boring kind of job they've got. Now, very simple. You know what we're talking about? We're talking about a catalyst on a team. We're talking about the person who has the ability to make things happen. And what I know about teamwork is that although you've got a total group of people making up a team, there's got to be somebody that's going to make it happen. And you need to recognize that, and you need to support that, and you need to do everything you can to help that person bring you to victory.